In today's video, Ilhan Omar is desperately trying to distance herself from the Minnesota welfare fraud scandal. And now get this, her latest attempt is to portray herself as one of the first whistleblowers who bravely called out the scheme. But what we're going to learn is that she was only playing Monday morning quarterback, showing up after the fraud was exposed. And so make sure you stay locked in. As always, the best way to show your support is by smashing that thumbs up. That tells me you like the video. And subscribe for more breakdowns like this.
And we're joined now by Minnesota Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Margaret.
We have a lot to get to with you, but I want to pick up on where the Treasury Secretary just left off. He alleged that people who were tied to you or your campaign were involved in this broad, brazen scheme to rip off the Minnesota state welfare system. Do you want to respond to that? Do you know what he is referring to?
I really don't, and I don't think the secretary himself understands what he's referring to. We obviously had people who were able to donate to our campaign that were involved. We sent that money back a couple years ago. And actually, I was one of the first members of Congress to send a letter to the Secretary of Ag asking them to look into what I thought was a reprehensible fraud that was occurring within the program.
Wow. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Ilhan Omar wants the public to believe she was actually a whistleblower in the Minnesota welfare fraud scandal. If you let her tell it, she was one of the first brave souls to point out the fraud, standing up to the corruption while everyone else looked the other way. There's only one problem with that entire story. It's not actually based in any type of fact. You see, Minnesota state officials were seeing fraud complaints as far back as 2018, 2019. Not rumors, formal complaints, and dozens of them. And this is the part that she's not going to bring up on TV because it'll destroy the timeline as far as her being a whistleblower and that whole story. While the fraud warnings existed, Omar wasn't exposing anything. She was actually promoting it. The Safari restaurant that was at the centerpiece of this entire scandal, yeah. Take a look at this.
horta aad iyo aad aan ugu faraxsanahay in maanta safaari aan soo gaarnay sida dadka badan ay u og yihiin ciyaalkeena yaryar ilaa iyo number la eg 20 milyan oo ciyaal iskooley ah waxay cuntadooda ka helaan iskoolka kaliya marka waxaan fursad u helnay in aan sharci soo gudbino oo la dhahayo Meals Act oo u fududeynayo in waqtigaanay pandemic aan ku jirno oo dhalinyarada iskoolka aynan joogin oo guryahooda ay joogaan aynan gaajoonin oo familkoodii wili ay fursad u helaan in cunto ay helaan oo meelo qaarkood laga qaybinayo ay cuntada ka soo qaadan karaan marka aadaan ugu mahadcelinayaa Safari in ay tahay meelaha sayti oo diyaarinayo cunto maalin kasto dhalinyarada ciyaalkii iyo familkoodina ku taakuleynaayo cuntada sayti maalintii kaliya Safari waxay ay cunto siisaa 2,300 oo ciyaal ah iyo familkooda.
This is still on YouTube right now on Somali TV of Minnesota YouTube channel, and it was posted on May 3rd of 2020, 2 years after it was already real whistleblowers blowing the whistle and filing complaints about the fraud. And leaders in Minnesota had already been made well aware of what was going on with this fraud. And so it doesn't look like she was warning anyone. If anything, it looked like she was boosting the organization at the center of the scandal after the warning signs were public inside the government. And it wasn't too far after that the FBI then opened up their investigation. And this is what really bothers me about this whole narrative that she's really trying to spin right now, because it's really based in nothing more than her just trying to distance herself from this entire fraud, this entire scandal. Because in January of 2022, the FBI was raiding Feeding Our Future. The affidavits go public, the news blows up nationally, and then that's when Ilhan Omar suddenly discovers the fraud. Oh, it's fraud going on, and sends her letter to the Secretary of Agriculture. And so when she goes on TV to act like she was out in front of the charge, come on, give me a break. By the time she wrote the letter, the house wasn't just on fire. The fire trucks were already parked outside, hose hooked up, walls collapsing. She wasn't one of the first. She was one of the last to speak up after the FBI had already exposed everything. And here's the truth, the uncomfortable truth. She doesn't want to address Minnesota Democrat leadership's had years of warnings. Fraud reports were piling up. Money was pouring out the door. Actual whistleblowers had already been blowing the whistle, but nothing actually changed until federal agents stepped in and shut the whole thing down. But now she wants credit because she sent the letter after the FBI raids. No, absolutely not.
So this was, just for our audience, the Biden-era Justice Department called it the largest COVID fraud scheme in the country. And this was pocketing COVID-era welfare funds, more than $1 billion in taxpayer money that was stolen. It was pretty shocking. Of the 87 people charged, all but 8 are of Somali descent. And that has added to the spotlight being put specifically on your community. Why do you think this fraud was allowed to get so widespread?
Well, I want to say, this also has an impact on Somalis because we are also taxpayers in Minnesota. We also could have benefited from the program and the money that was stolen. And so it's been really frustrating for people to not acknowledge the fact that we're also, as Minnesotans, as taxpayers, really upset and angry about the fraud that has occurred.
Mm-hmm. So do you think, though, that there was a failure by the Democratic state government to police itself? This is a brazen, fraudulent activity here.
Wow. Wow. Let's all get this straight. When Ilhan Omar is confronted about the fraud being so widespread, specifically in the Somali community, her answer is, well, we're actually the victims here. Give me a break. This was widespread in one particular community. Now, I think we're all intelligent enough to understand that it wasn't every Somali person who was involved here. I think we are all intelligent enough to understand that part of it. But we also have to understand that a majority of the people right now who are being charged are Somali. When you look at what the DOJ put out as far as what they've been able to uncover, even I spoke about this before with the autism fraud portion of this now that's being revealed. They were targeting these nonprofits, these fake businesses. You had people who started these businesses from the Somali community, these fake businesses, these fake nonprofits who chose to specifically deal with families in the Somali community. And the Somali community chose to participate. And so you had large families getting kickbacks from autism centers with saying their kid had autism when they didn't. I spoke about this before, $1,500 potentially per child per month. And if a family wanted to really scam, they could then say, hey, if you don't give us more money, we're going to go to the autism center down the block who's also doing fraud that we know because they reached out to us, and we're going to go get our check from them. These numbers aren't showing a glaring spike in the Asian community and the Hispanic community and the Black American community and the white American community. It's showing a spike in the Somali community of Minnesota. And Ilhan Omar wants to get on television and say, we're the victims here. This whole thing, don't forget, we're taxpayers and we are the victims. Give me a break.
Yeah, and that is what I alluded to in my letter that I'd sent to the Secretary of Eg, was to see where things were going wrong. How can this amount of money disappear fraudulently without there being alarms being set off? And it is something that, we have to continue to investigate. We have to continue to ask those questions.
Because, as you know, one of the initial defenses by the organization at the heart of the fraud, feeding our future was to claim the probe was due to racism. Do you think that this was all about negligence or that it was like political fear of alienating the Somali community?
So you have to remember that the woman who led the program is a Caucasian woman. And that was her way of making sure that this would continue to happen by using whatever rhetoric that was available to her. We do know that when the money was stopped, they did sue. The AG, Attorney General Keith Ellison, defended the department in that lawsuit. It was a judge that said it should continue, that money should continue to go out. And so this wasn't something that people were not looking at. There was always those alarms, and we will continue to understand where things might have gone wrong as these investigations continue and as these fraudsters are prosecuted and sent to jail.
Well, it's going to have impact for your community because we've already heard that the head of Medicare and Medicaid say they're going to have a new policy that applies to Minnesota. You heard the Treasury Secretary say they're investigating. But there's another thread here because House Republicans and the Treasury Secretary just now talked about a link to terrorism, a possible link. He said they're just now beginning to look into it. How confident are you that that's a false claim?
I'm pretty confident at the moment because there are people who have been prosecuted and who have been sentenced. If there was a linkage in that the money that they had stolen going to terrorism, then that is a failure of the FBI and our court system in not figuring that out and basically charging them with these charges.
Ilhan Omar argues that if this fraud money did go to terrorism, then it would be the failure of the FBI and our court system. That's a good one. But hold on, pause right there. That's not how responsibility works. You don't get to say, well, if criminals sent American taxpayer money overseas to fund terrorists, that's the FBI's fault for not catching it sooner. No. It's the criminal's fault for committing the crime. It's the state's fault for ignoring years of warnings. And it's the political leaders' fault for letting fraud run wild under their watch. Trying to pre-blame the FBI for something they're still actively investigating is a distraction tactic. It's a shield, not a fact. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. Defeating our future fraud ring had international ties. It had cash leaving the country. And federal agents have openly stated they're still following the money train. So Omar says she's pretty confident nothing went to terrorism is not evidence. It's public relations. And blaming the FBI ahead of time is not accountability. It's 100% pure deflection. The truth is, if the investigation ultimately uncovers a terror link, the blame doesn't fall on federal agents trying to unwind the scheme. It falls on the people who committed the crime and the political ecosystem that allowed it to grow to what's estimated now to what, nearly $8 billion before somebody stepped in? That's the part that Omar doesn't want to say out loud.
I want to ask you about something else that the architect of the president's immigration policy, Stephen Miller, said. On Thanksgiving Day, he posted, "No magic transformation occurs when failed states cross borders. At scale, migrants and their descendants recreate the conditions and terrors of their broken homelands." What do you make of this argument of failure to assimilate and sort of ruining America? How do you understand this?
I mean, when I think about Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric, it reminds me of the way the Nazis described Jewish people in Germany. And you know, as we know, there have been many immigrants who have tried to come to the United States who've turned back, one of them being Jewish immigrants. We know the way that people were described who were coming from Ireland, Irish immigrants. We know the way in which people were described back then when they were Italian immigrants. And to me, you know, we're yes, of course, ethnically Somali. We are in this country as Americans. Yeah. We are citizens. We are productive part of this nation, and we will continue to be.
Yeah, and you guys heard that last part. That's the part that had the internet in the uproar. She's calling Stephen Miller a Nazi, and turns out he's actually Jewish. So but stuff like that doesn't stop the left and people like Ilhan Omar from saying ridiculous things. And this is what people like Ilhan Omar on the left, this is what they do. They have no problem pointing out the dangerous rhetoric, they'll call it, that gets spewed, they'll say, by the right. But at the same time, they'll then use dangerous rhetoric themselves. That's quite fascinating. But when they say it, it's not dangerous rhetoric. No, it's simply them speaking facts if you ask them to define it. Guys, what do you guys think about this whole entire thing? Let me know. Ilhan Omar blatantly lying about the timeline as if she was some whistleblower who was standing up, pointing out the fraud, when in fact the FBI had already began the raids. The news was already publicizing it. She was being generous. She was 4 years too late with actually pointing anything out. You guys let me know what you think as far as this entire situation that keeps on unfolding. I'm going to keep on bringing this information to you guys because it's really interesting to listen to people like this. They talk, they get in front of the camera, and they will lie to your face as if it's breathing air with no problem. But guys, let me know your thoughts. Drop them down below. As always, the best way you can show your support is by smashing that thumbs up. That tells me you like the video, and subscribe for more breakdowns like this.